February 18th, 1519. 11 ships depart Cuba carrying 508 soldiers, 16 horses, 11 cannons, and one extraordinarily ambitious man. Hernán Cortés is 35 years old, broke, and leading an unauthorized expedition. The Cuban governor Diego Velázquez had appointed him, then revoked the mission after Cortés began acting too independently. So Cortés sailed anyway, stealing ships and supplies. He's gambling everything on finding gold, glory, and conquest. He has no idea he's about to destroy the largest empire in the Americas, an empire that doesn't yet know it's doomed. Tenochtitlan, capital of the Aztec Empire, sits on an island in Lake Texcoco. 200,000 people live there, more than any city in Europe except perhaps Constantinople. Raised causeways connect the island to shore. Aqueducts carry fresh water. Floating gardens supply food. The Templo Mayor, Great Temple, rises 15 stories. Its twin shrines dedicated to war god Huitzilopochtli and rain god Tlaloc. Emperor Moctezuma II rules from his palace, commanding a triple alliance of city-states spanning 6 million people. The Aztecs are militarily dominant, economically powerful, culturally sophisticated. They have no concept that everything is about to end. March 1519. Cortés lands on the Yucatan coast and immediately encounters indigenous Maya. After a brief battle at Potonchan, the defeated Maya offer tribute including 20 enslaved women. Among them is a young woman named Malinche, later called Malintzin, Dona Marina, La Malinche. Born to Aztec nobility, she was sold into slavery after her father died and her mother remarried. She speaks Nahuatl, the Aztec language, and Mayan. When Cortés realizes her value, he keeps her at his side. She learns Spanish within weeks. Suddenly, Cortés has what no other conquistador possessed: perfect translation between Spanish, Mayan, and Nahuatl. La Malinche becomes his interpreter, advisor, intelligence gatherer, and later, mother of his son. As Cortés marches inland, he discovers something crucial. The Aztecs are hated. For a century, they've built their empire through conquest and terror. Subject peoples pay crushing tributes in goods, labor, and human lives for sacrifice. When Cortés reaches Zempoala, the Totonac people beg for help, overthrowing Aztec rule. Then comes the greatest prize, Tlaxcala, an independent state that has resisted Aztec domination for decades. After initial skirmishes, Tlaxcalan leaders recognize an opportunity. These strange bearded men with their metal weapons, fire sticks, and godlike horses are enemies of their enemies. The alliance is sealed. Suddenly, Cortés commands not 500 Spaniards, but thousands of indigenous warriors eager for revenge. October 1519. Cortés and his growing army reach Cholula, second largest city in central Mexico. La Malinche overhears nobles plotting ambush. She warns Cortés, who strikes first. Spanish soldiers and Tlaxcalan warriors massacre thousands of unarmed Cholulan nobility in the central plaza. The city burns. It's a calculated act of terror, demonstrating what happens to those who oppose the Spanish. Word spreads. These strangers are lethal. November 8, 1519, Cortés enters Tenochtitlan. Moctezuma, paralyzed by indecision, and perhaps believing Cortés might be connected to prophecies of Quetzalcoatl's return, welcomes him peacefully. Within days, Cortés takes Moctezuma hostage in his own palace. The uneasy coexistence lasts 6 months. Cortés rules Tenochtitlan through the imprisoned Moctezuma while looting the treasury. But when Cortés leaves to confront rival Spanish forces sent by Velázquez, His lieutenant, Pedro de Alvarado, massacres hundreds of Aztec nobles during a religious festival. The city erupts. Moctezuma, whether killed by Spanish or by his own people for weakness, dies. Cuauhtémoc, Moctezuma's nephew, becomes emperor. On June 30th, 1520, La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows, Cortés and his men flee across the Tlacopan causeway. Aztec warriors attack from canoes, killing 870 Spanish soldiers and thousands of indigenous allies. Cortés barely escapes with his life. La Malinche at his side. The Aztecs have won. But Cortés doesn't surrender. He retreats to Tlaxcala and begins rebuilding. He orders construction of 13 brigantines, 50-foot warships equipped with cannons. Workers dismantle them, carry the pieces across mountains, and reassemble them at Lake Texcoco. It's an engineering marvel. While Cortés prepares, something invisible begins killing Aztecs. Bodies pile in Tenochtitlan's streets, faster than they can be buried. Faces covered in pustules, skin peeling, entire families dying within days. It's smallpox, carried by a single African slave in the Spanish ranks. The Aztecs have no immunity. The disease kills 90% of those infected. Emperor Cuitlahuac dies after ruling just 80 days. Leadership collapses. Food production stops. The city starves. May 22nd, 1521. Cortés launches the final assault. 13 brigantines surround Tenochtitlan, cutting off escape and supply routes. Over 200,000 indigenous warriors, mostly Tlaxcalans, who see their chance to destroy their ancient enemies, join 80 Spanish soldiers and 16 horses. The siege lasts 93 days. Cortés destroys aqueducts, cutting off fresh water. He blocks food deliveries. The Aztecs fight desperately, but they're starving, diseased, outnumbered. Spanish cannons blast holes in causeways. Brigantines sink Aztec canoes. Every day, the noose tightens. By August, the once magnificent city is a mass grave. Bodies rot in every building. Survivors boil leather and tree bark for food. August 13th, 1521. Emperor Cuauhtémoc, just 25 years old, attempts to escape by canoe. Spanish brigantines intercept him. When he's brought before Cortés, Cuauhtémoc reportedly says, "I have done what I was obliged to do in defense of my city. Now do with me what you will." He expects execution. Instead, Cortés tortures him for months, burning his feet to force him to reveal hidden gold. Cuauhtémoc never breaks. 3 years later, during an expedition to Honduras, Cortés has him hanged from a tree. The last Aztec emperor dies far from home, accused of plotting rebellion. With him dies the Aztec Empire. The destruction is total. Cortés orders Tenochtitlan razed to the ground. The great temple, spiritual heart of the Aztec world, is demolished stone by stone. Spanish workers build Mexico City directly on top of the ruins, placing Cortés's palace over Moctezuma's. Exquisite gold and silver artwork, crafted by artisans whose skill rivaled anything in Europe, is melted into ingots and weighed. The Spanish want wealth, not beauty. Within 3 years of first contact, an empire that took a century to build is gone. Not conquered in the traditional sense, where one ruling class replaces another, but obliterated. Language suppressed, religion banned, culture destroyed. The death toll defies comprehension. Before contact, an estimated 25 million people lived in central Mexico. By 1600, fewer than 1 million remain. Smallpox kills the majority. Successive waves of typhus, measles, and influenza follow. The Aztecs call these plagues cocolistli, pestilence. They have no medicines, no treatments. no understanding of contagion. How do you fight an invisible enemy? How do you defend against disease? The Spanish suffer minor losses. Most have childhood immunity. But for the Aztecs, every epidemic is apocalyptic. Entire villages vanish. Skilled artisans die before passing knowledge to apprentices. Elders who remember pre-conquest times perish, taking oral history with them. What destroyed the Aztecs wasn't superior Spanish valor or tactics. It was technology disparity, strategic alliances, and most devastatingly, biological warfare they never knew was being waged. The Spanish had steel swords, armor, crossbows, muskets, cannons, war horses, and attack dogs. The Aztecs fought with obsidian-edged wooden clubs, cotton armor, and spears. Cortes's first battle in March 1519 killed over 800 indigenous warriors and just 2 Spaniards. It was technological genocide, but more crucial were the alliances. Fewer than 600 Spanish soldiers couldn't conquer 6 million Aztecs. 200,000 indigenous warriors could and did. The Tlaxcalans lost 30,000 men destroying their enemies. They thought they were liberating themselves. Instead, they traded Aztec domination for Spanish colonization. And the diseases accomplished what no army could. Smallpox didn't distinguish between warrior and civilian, leader and peasant. It killed indiscriminately, collapsing social structures before battles were even fought. The siege of Tenochtitlan succeeded partly because half the defenders were already dead or dying. The survivors were starving, watching family members die of unknown plagues while Spanish cannons blasted their city apart. They fought brilliantly under impossible circumstances. Contemporary Spanish accounts grudgingly admire Aztec bravery. But courage can't stop smallpox. Shields can't deflect disease. The Aztecs faced an enemy they couldn't comprehend, invisible death arriving on foreign ships, turning their bodies against themselves. November 8th, 1519 to August 13th, 1521. 945 days. That's how long it took for 600 Spanish soldiers, 16 horses, and 200,000 indigenous allies to destroy an empire of 6 million. But the conquest didn't end in 1521. It continued for decades as diseases swept across the Americas. The Aztec Empire fell first because they were unlucky enough to face the most capable conquistador at the worst possible moment. But their fate was inevitable once Columbus sailed in 1492. The Columbian Exchange was catastrophic for indigenous Americans. They gave the world corn, potatoes, tomatoes, cacao. In return, they received smallpox, measles, typhus, and extinction. An empire destroyed without knowing why. That's the tragedy of 1519 to 1521.